Now, after 20 years of trying, this legislation is finally going into effect. While I recognize the need for identification to be trustworthy, I don't think Congress should be allowed to violate the Constitution to do so. Yes, what I've covered is mostly within the sections of federal recognition of IDs, but even there, Congress seems to have ignored the supreme law of the land. One of the obvious purposes of this so-called Real ID appears to be to make sure everyone has their illegal Social Security number. I'm still baffled by why the federal government wants to link their illegal retirement system to your photo ID. Could it be this is their attempt to create a national ID system? Congress has tried in the past to create a national ID and failed. Could linking Real ID to your Social Security number be a backdoor way to do so? By placing any financial assistance to the states to their participation in an interstate compact to share data, Congress has effectively created a national ID database, including not only your name and birth date, but a facial recognition image. And this data is linked with your state ID, which includes copies of the documents used to prove your identity. In other words, everything law enforcement needs to find you if they want. This would be scary enough if Congress and the courts required law enforcement to follow the Fourth Amendment, but in general they haven't. Does the federal government have the authority to determine requirements for the identification documents they can accept? Yes. Can Congress limit access to federal buildings to those with proper ID? Generally, yes, but I do see some problems with that limitation being put in place. Does the federal government have the right to limit air travel to those with these documents? I see nothing in the Constitution that would grant to them that power. After all, the act of flying is not commerce. Well, Congress can regulate both interstate and foreign commerce parts of commercial flight. Where do they get the power to regulate who gets to fly? It's not the Constitution of the United States. Now, after asking about the constitutionality of the Real ID Act, the next most common question is, do I need one? Ultimately, it's up to you. When I lived in New York State, I got an enhanced driver's license to allow me to drive across the Canadian border without other documentation. It was a very similar system. That was my decision, which I made for my convenience. While many news outlets imply that people will need a Real ID to fly or to enter a federal building, that's not entirely true. There are other federally recognized IDs, like a passport, which will work just fine for these purposes. So the answer to the question, do you really need a Real ID, ultimately comes down to your convenience versus your concerns about a federal ID database. If you have no immediate need to fly or enter a federal building, you can put off this decision until you renew your driver's license. The major concern I have personally regarding Real ID is that national database. Will Congress one day try to force the states to only issue Real ID driver's license? Well, unconstitutional, illegal, and void, it would not surprise me one little bit. And if you're hoping the courts would prevent such unconstitutional legislation, recent history shows that would be unlikely.